people that make our city run, our office girls and our police and fire departments, maintenance, Lord. We pray for all their safety. And we pray, Lord, that you guide us and give us the blessing of your wisdom so we can take Attica into the future. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
We are live, but it's not 6 o'clock yet.
So do you do anything more with all your free time now?
Not much so far.
That's probably the best thing ever.
I've enjoyed it right now.
I just can't get Dwayne to do
I'm not bored yet, so.
Well, there you go. That's good. It's always nice having a little bit more time to.
I have 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Clerk will take a roll, please.
Mr. Grant,
Present.
Mrs. DeLong,
Present.
Mr. Moss,
Present.
Mr. Voorhees,
Present.
Mrs. Carnahan,
Present.
Mr. Roderick,
Present.
okay, Mayor.
Okay, we don't have any junior council members here tonight. At this time, we'll go ahead and open the budget hearing.
If anybody's here for the budget public hearing, I put out the advertised notice that you're welcome to take one. Council members, it's included in the packet that Ross is going to hand out. Plus, I emailed that along to you with the budget line items last week. Unless anybody has a question and public has a question for me, I think the council's questions will probably come after Ross does his presentation.
Okay, this time I have a motion to close the hearing unless anybody has any questions right now. Okay. Got a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing's closed. Ross, you're up.
Yeah.
Baker Tilly budget presentation.
All right, I've got a copy of cash flows that we prepared in conjunction with the budget, just to kind of summarize what the much larger actual full budget kind of says and speaks to. Give a copy to everybody. I probably could have handed out before.
It's the fancy paper thing. You got
Yeah.
the fancy paper.
Well, I didn't make the copies, so
Well, somebody's
that's how.
using the fancy paper.
Ooh, it is nice.
I'll take it. And I didn't really this up here. So this is a copy of the full budget book. So what this is, and I just brought one because it's otherwise we'd be killing a lot of trees. But this is a printout of essentially all of the forms that are in Indiana's Gateway website, which is where we actually enter the budget for the Department of Local Government Finance to review. And I sent Joanne an electronic copy as well. I don't know that it'd be very interesting to peruse that, as this kind of summarizes what that says. But I did want to bring a copy just so everybody could see it, or we could look at it if needed, and I have another copy for me too, which I can leave here after the meeting. So this, like I said, the small handout is a summary of the budget. So if you want to open it up to the first page, which is actually page 2. So this is a summary of kind of selected funds. So basically, essentially we put in here in this cash flow all of the funds that we do a budget for that essentially have, a cash impact for the city, starting with kind of the general fund and then working through other funds as well. There's a lot of numbers on this page. I won't go through all of them because we'll be here all night. But I will kind of walk you through in a little bit more detail kind of the general fund and then focus on kind of like the impacts of the other funds and just point you to some kind of high level things that I think are important to focus on. So the general fund is the first column. We've got in about the top half of the page operating receipts for that general fund. In the general fund, primarily, you bring in property taxes as one of your major revenue sources there. We're slated to bring in about $850,000 in gross property taxes in the general fund for 2025. Of that, about 10% you don't receive due to circuit breaker tax credits. Those are the property tax caps that you have on residential, commercial properties. Depending on what they are, there'll be different caps, but you lose a little bit of your property tax revenue due to those tax caps. So net, we'd expect you to receive about $766,000 in the general fund. Beyond that, you do bring in some significant other sources of income within that general fund. Most notably is your local income tax, which you receive about $640,000 in local income tax. From there, you have other taxes, which are things like financial institution tax, license excise tax, ABC gallonage, cigarette tax, so different smaller taxes that you bring in about $175,000. You have licenses and permits, charges for services, fines, forfeitures and fees, other receipts. So these are just kind of the different receipt categories in total across both your property taxes and then all your other receipts that you bring in the general fund. We'd expect you to bring in 2025 a little under $1.8 million in operating receipts, $1,776,000. Below that, we've got your operating disbursements. This is broken down by category. So in the budget, we have to propose expenditures by category. There are personal services, which are your kind of 100 level line items, which are like salaries and employee benefits, for example. Different supplies, services and charges, which would be like engineering costs, utility costs, things like that would be in that services and charges category. And then capital outlays would be the last category. So in the general fund, you can see, the different numbers there. We've got about $1.3 million in personal services, which is your largest component of costs, $60,000 in supplies, about $600,000 in services and charges, and a little under $100,000 in capital outlays. So in total, in the general fund, we have operating disbursements of about $2,070,000 in the general fund. Below that, you can see there's an estimated change in cash line. You can see it's a decrease of about $300,000 in the general fund is what we've got shown there for 2025. And I'll circle back to that. But just below that, you'll see there's an estimated beginning fund balance, a little over $1.1 million, and then estimated ending fund balance, a little over $800,000. So a couple things there that I think before we move on that are important to know. First and foremost, this is essentially how your budget is proposed in the Indiana Gateway. The Department of Local Government Finance will review and then approve or deny or change. So essentially what that means is this includes everything we're asking for in the budget in it. So when we say these, operating disbursements by category, we've got, $2,070,000. This cash flow that we show here assumes that you're going to spend every single dollar that you have budgeted. That's not necessarily likely to happen. Historically, you've underspent your budget. So when we say, we show a negative, $294,000 in the general fund, that's not necessarily saying that I expect you to actually lose $294,000 in the general fund, but rather if you spend every single dollar that we're asking for approval to spend, that would be essentially what we estimate is going to occur. So along those same lines, when we say estimated beginning fund balance, that also assumes that you spend every single dollar that you have budgeted in the current year, 2024, which again may or may not happen. You may underspend your budget in 2024, the current year budget that we adopted last year. But this assumes that you're going to spend every dollar that we have budgeted. And the reason why we show it that way is because when the DLGF reviews your budget, they're essentially going to look at the question, do you have enough money to be able to support your ask, your budgeted ask, what we're asking to spend? If the answer is yes, they'll approve your budget. If the answer is no, so if we showed an estimated ending fund balance in the negative, they would cut your budget. So the DLGF doesn't kind of look at what you're asking for to spend, the individual line items. They kind of look at it as a whole. Can you fund this or not? If you can, they'll approve your budget. So ultimately in the general fund, certainly they'll approve your budget. But what we're showing is that, cash shortfall is about $300,000. I do want to note too a couple different things about some line items that we have in that general fund budget. I think one thing that's important to note is we've got in insurance, we've got and this is like health insurance for employees, we've got a $270,000 budget, which historically we've spent about half that, I'd say, on a given year. I was talking with Joanne before when we were kind of prepping the budget, and we wanted to include some allowance just in case employees change to a more expensive health plan. So we've got a little bit of wiggle room there. So I think there's a chance that you're going to kind of underspend in that insurance line item. So I did want to note that. And then I also did want to note, typically, in the services and charges line item, we've got about $600,000 in the budget. Typically, we've spent a little closer to $500,000 there. It's just we've got so many line items within that services and charges budget that if you give a little bit of extra allowance in each of those line items to make sure we don't overspend the budget, that's going to kind of accrue to a higher number in total. So I think there's a chance that you'll probably underspend that services and charges line item as well. So, not all negative news in the general fund. I would expect, based on this budget, that even if we spend more typical health insurance number and services and charges numbers, we'll probably lose a little bit of cash in the general fund. But I don't think anywhere near that $300,000 number that we showed here. So I think that's important to know. One last thing in the general fund, I think it's good to know. You'll see just below that ending fund balance, we have an operating balance percent line that's about 39%. Basically what that means is if you take your ending cash and you divide it by your operating disbursements, what's that percentage? So what that's telling you is if you don't bring in any money in receipts, which we're going to bring in receipts, but if we don't, you could get through 40% of the year before you run out of cash. I mentioned that, and we'll see that on some schedules later on, because we kind of recommend that you have at a minimum for funds that really support an operating budget. So you have those day-to-day expenditures that you're spending on. You have at least 15% operating balance, which is basically like 2 months window essentially. And if you have a 50% cash balance or better, you get a pretty healthy cash balance is what we typically say, because that gets you through 6 months of the year. You get 2 property tax distributions in a year, and it's a pretty good chunk of your revenues is property tax distributions. So if you can get through 6 months of the year without receiving any dollars in operating receipts, you've got a pretty comfortable, healthy cash balance. So you'll see we're at about roughly 40%. We're a little bit under that 50% marker. But like I said, it is important to note that we're not necessarily going to spend every dollar of that budget in both 2024 and 2025. Clearly, there's a chance we could end up near that 50% marker more realistically in the general fund. So there is kind of a little bit of a budgeted shortfall there, but I think it's something that could be withstood at least in the near term. Certainly, want to kind of keep an eye on spending in future years too in budgets to make sure it's not a trend that keeps kind of continuing or accelerating for that matter too. So that was a lot. I promise I won't go through that much detail in each of the funds, but I kind of wanted to pause here and see if there's any questions for general, since that's your most significant fund with your most significant amount of expenditures in it before we kind of move to the next funds.
This is the time. I know that the budget is overwhelming. There's a lot of information. So, if you guys have questions now, now is a really good time if you need more detail or more clarification. I will add also in the general budget, Mayor Grant and I talked about considering transitioning to a new software. And we did in the clerk treasurer budget account for that. We added $50,000 in there that typically we wouldn't spend. It wouldn't be part of the budget. So it is a one-time expenditure that's not normally going to be in there. But at this point, I've talked with the gentleman, not in any detail. We haven't even done any type of fact finding with respect to what our needs are. So I have no idea whatsoever what the cost of that type of transition would be. And obviously it's not something that's going to happen anytime soon, but that money is in the budget. So it might be a possibility in 2025 if the council decides to go that direction. And there's also, I think there's some of it in the general fund. Eric, oh no, I guess it's not.
Are you talking the back?
Yeah, it's not in the general.
I have that in the bucket there.
I was to say,
I have the general fund though, yeah.
Yeah, it's not out of the general fund.
I did actually have what you said in my notes, Joanne, and I neglected to say it. So I appreciate that.
That's okay. That's all right.
Well, I guess I'll kind of shift then to the motor vehicle highway fund, and then here I'll just kind of hit more on the estimated kind of change in cash by fund, and then kind of where you're going to be at if you spend your full budget, and then any kind of notable things about that fund, which MVH will have a couple notable things. For the motor vehicle highway fund, and I'm just looking at the estimated change in cash, we show about $250,000 decrease in cash in motor vehicle highway in 2025. Which would leave you with about $130,000 in ending fund balance. It is very important to note, though, that you'll see if you kind of look up just a little bit from that $250,000 decrease in cash, you'll see there's a line item for operating disbursements, capital outlays of $282,000 for motor vehicle highway in 2025 budget. I did want to mention, the budget shortfall in the MVH fund is really driven by this capital outlay item. That is inclusive of $150,000 for a potential local match for a community crossing project. And I'll kind of expand on that and say that we've included in these budget numbers in total about $300,000 of local match for a $1.2 million community crossing project. That number is certainly not set in stone anywhere. I think that's where, when we were kind of preparing the budget, we felt comfortable that you could afford that with the cash balances that we have in these various funds, even if you spend down that full 2024 budget that you have in place. So that's what we currently have in the budget. If you were to determine next year that you want to do a community crossing project and do an application for a larger project or a smaller project, we could certainly work with that. This is just kind of the tentative amount that we wanted to build into the budget so that, if you do have a project that kind of would fit within that parameter, we wouldn't need to go back and ask the DLGF for permission to spend on it in the future. So 150,000 of that capital number is essentially half of the local match for a potential community crossing project next year, which would be a 25% local, 75% grant if you were to do a community crossing project for road and street improvements. Beyond that, $132,000 we've got included for the downtown project in this fund for MVH. And I guess just to mention as a whole for the downtown project, we've got a little bit layered into this 2025 budget for the downtown project. Essentially what we tried to target was, I took a look at what we had budgeted last year for the downtown project before we hit final numbers, worked with Joanne to see, what the kind of total cost of the downtown project is going to be. And then we tried to layer in the difference between what the actual cost is going to be and what we had budgeted last year, so that you can kind of know that the full cost of the downtown project is incorporated in the numbers that you're going to see here in the 2025 budget. That doesn't necessarily mean from a timing perspective, this is how much would be in 2025 versus 2024, but the full kind of scope of the project, cost of the project is incorporated in these numbers. And also important to mention that includes the kind of additional $200,000 roughly in costs that the council's been, I think, informed about as a possible addition to that project that if the funds were available, you may decide to move forward with. That $200,000 is incorporated in these numbers as well.
And if the project ends up completing in 2024 as it was originally intended, then we would need to do an additional appropriation in this year, but then we could do a budget reduction next year, or we wouldn't spend it next year if we spent it this year.
Good.
And the community crossing grant, literally, we didn't apply for the community crossing grant in 2024. We did apply for it, second round. There's 2 rounds a year, usually February and July, somewhere around there.
Yes.
And we applied for the first round in 2023. We turned it down because the bids came in way over the estimate. We applied in the second round in 2023 and were awarded that. That is what is funding a portion of our streetscape downtown.
Yep.
So none of the community crossing grant funds have been used for road paving other than what they're allowed to cover. And then, of course, the city is picking up everything not covered under the community crossing grant, including the engineering costs and, benches and, all kinds of other stuff that's incorporated into that's not an allowable expense under community crossing. So I've heard a lot of council members, I've heard a lot of people come into the clerk's office, and a lot of people talk to the mayor complaining about the roads. We've historically, since I've been here, have not spent very much on paving. We've applied for the grant every year and we've been awarded it every year. But when Ross and I were talking about the budget, and I knew we were doing this cash flow, I said, I really want you to look at this and I want you to incorporate in the budget the absolute max we could afford to put towards community crossing next year in 2025, because we will apply for the first round in 2025. Only because there's so much that was, has been neglected since everything that we received in the last round went for the downtown project. So that just gives you a little bit more detail.
HWC has been working on, and I don't even know exactly what it stands for. What's the PAMP? Are you aware of the?
Yeah, and PACER ratings, I think, too, are involved in that. They'll go around and they'll evaluate each road and they'll show what they see as the worst, and then you'll decide.
So that had to be upgraded this year. So they're working on that. They're due to have that back to us, I think, in October.
Well, that's
So
good.
And the PAMP, I think, is kind of a map of the city and
It
all the
is.
roads and
Yeah.
everything.
So that'll tell us where we need to
redo that
spend
every
those
so
dollars,
often.
but-
Yeah.
You know, I told somebody today that was asking me about it, I said, you know, it's like 2 steps forward and 3 steps back with the road paving, and we need to figure out a way to try to get at least 3 steps forward,
Right.
and they stay at 3 steps forward.
And it's been kind of unknown territory because that community crossings only became available, I think, the first year I was mayor. And we really didn't know as far as working into a budget, so we didn't have a budget really at that time.
Trying to get as much out of them as I can,
Yeah.
and we can throw as much as, because we didn't do any paving this year. So that puts us even further behind the 8 ball, I think. But really trying to make sure that we address some of these street problems in the upcoming year.
I think that'll be good, and I think it'll be good to say, hey, this is the streets we're doing because this is who's deciding it. We're not deciding it. This
Exactly.
is who's deciding it.
Yeah.
This is what needs to be done by professionals.
Yeah.
So I think that's good too.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I agree. And a couple of just quick notes on the community crossing. So normal years, your maximum project is a 1.3333 million project. It's $1 million in grant, $333,333 in local match. For potentially 2025 only, the maximum project would be $2 million total with 1.5 grant, 500,000 local. They may extend that into future years, but they've only guaranteed that it's going to be in place for 2025. Obviously, we've not included in the budget a number that exceeds the former maximum, but that's not to say that when we actually get to 2025, we wouldn't be able to afford that. It's possible that you underspend your 2024 budget and we have more money available to be able to go after a larger amount of dollars. But this is the amount that if you did spend that full 2024 budget, we were comfortable that you should be able to go after essentially in 2025.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just for 2025.
2025.
And it is still 75-25, isn't it, as far
Correct.
as match?
75 grant, 25 local, and doesn't cover engineering. So, yep. So I guess all that to say, if you kind of normalize out those kind of more one-time in nature capital outlay type expenditures, you're really at a balanced budget and really a budgeted increase in cash from the motor vehicle highway fund. So good news there, even though on the surface it doesn't appear to be good news when you look at the decrease in cash shown. Local road and street is next. So this is the backhoe that Joanne was referring to, or a portion of the backhoe. So we included in the budget, so the total cost of a assumed purchase of a backhoe of $200,000, and we assumed that would be split between water, sewer, so third water, a third sewer, and then a third city funds. Of those city funds, we earmarked kind of $50,000 from this local road and street fund. You can see, if you look at the estimated ending fund balance, that would take us to an ending fund balance about $5,500 in local road and street fund. So we couldn't afford the full, $66,667 out of local road and street. So we have $50,000 here. The other, portion of that we've got slated over in, I believe it's in, bear with me, I will find it.
CCD.
CCD, that's right. Yes, thank you. Yep, CCD fund. So the backhoe's in that capital improvement number in CCD fund when we get there. So yeah, important to note there, and you don't fund any, you'll see a pretty low ending cash balance, low operating balance percentage there. We don't fund any operating costs from that. So we're really only using it for those capital outlay type items in that local road and street fund. So no concern with actually drawing down that balance. That's really what it's been used for in the past for the city. Park is next. So for park fund, we actually show a decrease in cash of about $50,000. And in park, I think this is more of a based on kind of the budgeted revenues that we have coming in, budgeted expenditures. This is more of a budgeted shortfall rather than there's this certain thing in place that's causing this 1 year to be a decrease in cash. I think really there is a shortfall in the cash budget in park. But having said that, we do have a capital allowance in there for $32,000. If we weren't to spend that, we'd be a little bit closer to break even cash flows in park. A couple things we can think about for future years. You have the cash to be able to support that in 2025, so I don't think it's an issue for 2025. When we get out into 2026 and beyond, we can consider shifting a little bit of property tax levy into park and out of some other funds. So you have essentially a maximum levy that you split between general, MVH, and your park fund. You can, it's a set amount, and you can kind of choose how much goes into each fund. We've set park kind of at the same ratio that it's been at in the past. If we need to in 2026, we could consider probably moving a little bit from MVH to park to be able to support that budget if needed in 2026. We'll also evaluate again next year. Obviously, if you underspend your park budget in 2024, we'll probably paint a similar picture when we're having this conversation next year, but be able to absorb it for 2026. So just something to keep in mind with the park fund, that there is a little bit of a systemic kind of budget shortfall there, which we can fix in future years and we can absorb it in 2025.
And just so you know, part of the overrun in the budget for 2024, and the reason it's budgeted substantially higher in 2025 are personnel costs.
Mm-hmm.
We are already in the negative in the personal services by over $15,000. The seasonal employees have started earlier and are working longer. They start usually in March, April, and they've been working through November. And when Eric and I looked at the budget last year, we were basing it on the personal services from the year before. Benny was working and wasn't working 40 hours a week. And now we do have two young men who are working 40 hours a week every week. So there is a shortfall in personal services, and it's due to, park maintenance and park employees. And then the $32,000 as far as capital projects. The park board did ask for a slight increase in a couple other line items, but nothing substantial. Like I said, the biggest shortfall is just in the employees. It's in the personal services salaries. And the $32,000 isn't earmarked for anything. The park board just requested that be included in the budget. So if we do have a shortfall somewhere else, then that's going to have to make up for that.
Okay, Q capital development is next. So as Dre mentioned, thank you, Dre, for that. The backhoe is included in that. So in total in Q capital development, we show a decrease in cash of about $325,000. I don't want to alarm you with that because that's really focused on kind of one-time in nature items. So backhoe is a part of that. We also have within this budget about $310,000 for the downtown project. That's where we're really absorbing kind of the majority of the shortfall in what we had budgeted in 2024 for the project is in this Q capital development fund. Beyond that, there's also $50,000 for the community crossing grant match included in the CCD fund. So 150 in motor vehicle highway, 50 in CCD, and when we get to it in a couple of funds here, the remaining 100,000 is in your seeded fund for that 300,000 local match. So really, driven by those one-time in nature items. Beyond that, we have 15,600 budget in services and charges. I think the line item for that is the potential ambulance rental, the monthly rental potential for the ambulance there. So I will mention too in CCD, that's the other fund that you have a property tax levy of that's not in your maximum levy. In the CCD fund, you actually can receive a property tax rate outside of that maximum amount that the state kind of gives you automatically. It's based on a rate, so it's a 5 cent per $100 of assessed value maximum tax rate that we've established at that maximum amount. So as your assessed value grows, you receive more money in property tax. And we actually did have a growth in assessed value this year, and the number that we show in property tax is about $70,000 in CCD. Reflects that growth in assessed value. It's a 5 cent tax rate on your total assessed value. CCI, Cume Capital Improvement SIG tax is next. So this fund doesn't really support operations. We get a little bit each year from cigarette tax revenue that builds up year over year. And then, we're essentially proposing to use most of that money, $90,000 on capital projects in 2025. This is also for the downtown project. So all 90,000 of this is essentially the shortfall in what was budgeted in 2024 for the downtown project. And that would take us down to about a $6,000 cash balance in CCI.
This is that 200,000 that we're trying to come up with.
So basically there's a small overage from what was initially budgeted plus the 200,000, and then that all is getting absorbed through kind of these various line items that we've selected to fund that. So motor vehicle highways funding a portion of that, CCD is funding a portion of that, CCI is funding a portion of that. CDIT is next. I mentioned already. You receive, this is a economic development income tax. You receive or expect to receive about $170,000 in that income tax in 2025. We've shown here $100,000 for community crossing grant match. And then the $169,000, I believe a portion of that would be slated for WEGA, and then a portion is just budgeted for potential economic development purposes that you may need. Essentially, the idea there, that $169,000 being a number that matches the revenue that you're going to bring in. The $100,000 is existing cash balance that we could potentially use on community crossing project.
And just so you know, when you approve the $25,000 Main Street support check, it comes out of this fund.
Yes. So that'd be a portion of that $169,000 that's in the budget. Debt service is the next fund. This is kind of we do receive a property tax levy. It's kind of unique in that we receive essentially a set amount. So there's some rules around how much you can levy each year and how much you can hold as an ending cash balance. Essentially, you can hold 15% of the next year's payment. So if we're looking at the 2025 budget, your 2026 debt payments, you can hold 15% at the end of 2025. So the DLGF does some formulas to be able to calculate what you can get in property tax levy to kind of make that happen. That's what we've done here. We'd expect you to bring in about $113,000 in property taxes. At the end of the year, holding about $16,500, which is about 15% of your following year's payments. So it's kind of we'll levy about the same amount each year until your general obligation debt is paid off. Roughly that $115,000 in levy.
This is the general obligation bond that originally was targeted to do the upgrades at Wabachi Park down by the riverfront. Can you just briefly address, there's been some misunderstanding regarding the potential uses of the general obligation bond?
Sure.
I mean, can you just speak to that
Yeah,
briefly?
so when you do general obligation debt, or any debt for that matter, there's some authorizing legal documents that get adopted. The main important one for that is your bond ordinance. So when we went to do the general obligation debt, we adopted a bond ordinance. That bond ordinance will have in it a description of the projects that we intend to fund with the general obligation bond proceeds. It can't be used to cover operating costs. Any bond can't be used to cover operating costs. It has to be used to, do a project essentially. But we've outlined at that time what projects we intend to do with that money. Within that, that can always be amended. So if you change your mind and want to do a different project, you can amend your bond ordinance, which would allow you to do different projects that you may want to do, but essentially would need to be projects. So I don't have the bond ordinance in front of me to tell you exactly what the description of the project was. Typically, we try to keep, if I'm giving input on a project description, which I don't think I did for this one, but I try to keep it fairly generic so that you can do a lot of different things with the money if you change your mind. But, if you want to do, what you intended to do originally, and that's only going to cost you half of what you had in the bond, you can always go back and amend your bond ordinance, and that will allow you to do different projects or fund different projects with those bond proceeds.
So it sounds like if we amend that, we can use it on any project that we do.
Project, yeah.
But
So-
it may be general enough that we wouldn't even need to amend it, depending on what the project is, because it is very, very general.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, I'm not saying you should or would want to do this, but just, obviously we have a big downtown project. If you wanted to use bond proceeds on downtown project, you can certainly consider doing that and amending bond ordinance to be able to do that too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that was the last fund on page 2. On page 3, less funds to look at, and most will not take as long. So casino riverboat, you bring in a little bit of riverboat tax each year, about $14,000. We don't have anything budgeted out of riverboat, but we did budget most of your riverboat funds to be spent down in 2024. So we're essentially building funds back up in that fund is the intent. We'd expect about $25,000 ending balance at the end of 2025 in riverboat. Continuing education, this is kind of just in and out. It's police continuing education fund. So a small amount comes in revenues each year, small amount budget. Not much to go through there. Local road and bridge is next. This is like a pass-through fund essentially that you have to use for community crossing projects. So you can see here the $1.2 million that we've talked about in receipts coming in, $1.2 million in capital projects going out. It's just in and out. So no change expected in that fund. Low public safety is next. This is another one of your income tax funds, specifically to be used on public safety. We're going to bring in about $190,000 in local income tax for that in 2025. We've only got budgeted about $130,000, so actually we've got a budget surplus there of about $60,000. Because this can be used on any public safety expenditures, This I did want to mention is a fund where we could consider shifting some expenses to in future years potentially. So, any police type of expenses that you have in your general fund, if those wanted to be shifted to public safety in the future to alleviate some of the strains on the general fund, that could be something that council would consider as well in future years. Since you do have a surplus in that fund, about $60,000 budgeted. Food and beverage is last, so expecting to bring in roughly $140,000 in food and beverage tax. Obviously if more restaurants open up, that's going to go higher, but roughly $140,000. We've got budgeted just $100,000 right now, which I believe is earmarked for WEGA for 2025. That would leave us with a change in cash, an increase in cash budget of about $40,000, and we'd be built up to about $125,000 in that fund at the end of 2025. So in total, across the funds that you see here, we'd show about $1 million decrease in cash across all of those funds, primarily driven by spend down of funds for capital projects that we talked about. So the community crossing grant would be about $300,000. The various funds that we're hitting for the downtown project, the backhoe as well, all kind of contributing towards that cash spend down overall. But we did have fairly healthy cash balances, about $2.5 million across those funds going into 2025. If you spend your full 2024 budget, that leaves you about $1.5 million across these funds in ending cash, about a 28% operating balance across all these funds.
Once we get done with this downtown project, then things will level off for 2026 considerably, correct? So we can build some cash reserves back up.
So I think that would be the intent, would be, if we're not spending on this downtown project, we'd be a lot more level on those cash reserves. That doesn't, account for any projects that you may have come up in 2026 that are more one-time in nature. But if you don't have projects like that, I think we'd expect you to see certainly some improvement on cash flows. So that's a lot of the decrease there. And then obviously the community crossing projects as well. While it's great to get 75% grant, it does cost the $300,000 in local match.
You're probably aware we've got some pending annexation as well that should help that out a bunch. If we can get that handled here the first of the year.
Yeah.
That's going to be big.
And if you get annexations, that kind of helps you twofold. Obviously it brings down your property tax rate, which is great for everyone. But it also, you can get an adjustment, a one-time adjustment to your maximum levy. That could increase your maximum levy by up to a maximum of 15%. So you can bring in more property taxes essentially with the annexation as well.
Good.
And it's an automatic adjustment, so nothing we need to apply for.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Well, and abatements, there's a lot of moving parts in our property taxes. The abatements that are granted, we've granted 2. Well, I guess 1 last year, 1 this year. That's going to reduce our property taxes because you're giving the developers tax break or the employer a tax break. So it's a lot, there's just a lot of moving parts. It's not just a straightforward formula. And that's why I really wanted Baker Tilly and Ross to pull all those pieces together, because we've had a lot of potential growth with apartments that we haven't seen. Plus we've approved tax abatements or tax reductions. So all of those things could potentially negatively impact our revenues coming to the city by not having that growth and not having those revenues. Plus we're increasing our spending.
So I should point out that these revenues don't count any of our sewer and water revenues.
Correct.
Because those are separate from this.
Right.
Yes.
So
Right.
just for the rest of the council, I know Dwayne knows this probably, but the rest of the council that might not know, I didn't know for a long time. So don't feel like the Lone Ranger here, but sewer and water are utilities, so they're not included in this. This is basically just tax revenues, riverboat, that sort of stuff that's coming in.
The utilities are just like owning a business. They're self-sufficient and they don't mingle. You don't take anything out of, water and sewer, stormwater to fund anything in general or operating.
Right.
Now, there are those types of services in those. Obviously we have expenses, personnel expenses, supply expenses, we have all those.
Well, we took out that big bond and stuff like that, but that's all built in with that all. It doesn't come out of anything here, right? Correct.
No, it doesn't come out of any of this. That was the reason that there were water rates, was to repay that bond for the water project.
Yep. And I will say too, it's not really built in here, but the only interplay that you may have between utilities and city is you could choose to implement, it's called payment in lieu of taxes.
We already
So,
have it.
Yeah, so.
We have it.
Yeah, so basically it's because you don't pay taxes in the utility, you can do a payment in lieu of taxes into your general fund. Typically that's set at an amount that's what's affordable within your rate structure. There is a statutory maximum that you can go up to based on the value of your assets and your tax rate. We can potentially move that up or down depending on, what the council wishes, if there is need for additional dollars in the general fund. But, not something we build in here is any change there, because that would probably necessitate a rate change on the utilities if you were to dial that number up. Okay, so any questions on the city funds, that we just went through? And I just really briefly on page 4, just for, to get your eyes on it, we've got essentially the same thing shown for the 2 fire territory funds. Not really a lot to go through there because the budget's essentially set to break even in both of those funds. So, but you are the adopting body for the fire territory. So we have the fire territory general fund. They have their own property tax levy. They have their own working maximum levy. That's what goes into this general fund, at about $300,000 in property taxes. They budgeted about that same amount, so expecting about break-even cash there. Fire territory equipment is kind of like your CCD fund, where it's based on a tax rate. Their maximum is 3 1/3 cents per $100 of assessed value. That's what they're essentially be levying. They actually saw a pretty good increase in their assessed value, so their dollars for that fund will go up. In 2025, we'll be able to get about $121,000 in that fund. So in total, they bring in about $420,000 or so in property tax levy. Overall, about a break-even fire territory. And then just for illustration purposes, so you're not just looking at numbers alone, we've got for some of your really more major funds, so general, NVH, park, CCD, and on the next page, you've got your seated public safety, fire territory, general fire territory equipment. This is just kind of in red, yellow, blue, like traffic light form of what's your operating balance percentage. I talked about that 15% threshold and the 50% threshold that you kind of want to hit at least the 15. Ideally 50, but that's really saying you have a pretty good cash balance. If you look at these, general, MVH, park, you're really in the yellow in all those. Parks like kind of right on that border of yellow, red, which we talked about park a little bit. CCD, you don't actually support, really an operating budget. That's really more capital in nature. We did include it because it's a major fund, but, I think going under that 15% in CCD is not really a concern because it's for capital expenditures. You expect to build that up and then kind of use it in a big year of capital projects. On the following page, CDIT is very similar to CCD in that same way where we're building it up for capital projects, we spend it down for capital projects. Public safety lit, obviously we're in the green there. That was the one fund where we had a big budget surplus and we've been able to build cash up. And that's why I mentioned it as a spot to potentially shift expenditures if needed in future years to that public safety lit fund. And then we have fire territory general, which is, in the yellow. We've only had a year, so we haven't had a lot of time to build cash. We have built a little bit of cash in there. Fire territory equipment is another one of those capital project type funds. So that's under that 15%, but not a concern because it's for those capital projects in nature for that fire territory equipment fund. That's it. I'll stop talking after a long time.
No, thank you.
But happy to answer questions. We are in the process of updating kind of a 5-year look forward from this budget. So you can kind of see and really this goes to the question that was asked earlier about, this year we've got downtown project. What does it look like in future years? We're going to build cash. That kind of answers those questions. Is this an issue? When we see these shortfalls in general park, does that mean we're going to run out of cash in 2027, 2028, 2029? So we're looking at that. We're in the process of updating that. So obviously we'll send that around when that's ready. But I just wanted to mention that, we kind of extrapolate this out for that document. So for 2025 itself, we'd certainly expect the DLGF to approve all your budgets as asked for. We're not going to run any issues there with them cutting or slashing any of the budgets. And while we have some, budgeted shortfalls, a lot of those I think are more capital focused in nature. So some things we want to keep an eye on, I think, as we do the budget for 2026 and make sure that we've not started a large trend. But I think, as proposed, we can withstand the budget in 2025 without issue.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Very helpful.
Yeah, happy to help.
Anybody have any questions or want to talk about any of this right now? Kaylee? Okay.
Now, this is the budget presentation. It will be adopted at the October meeting. That's why this is the last possible date. And you'll see well, it's in the booklet, but there's time requirements with respect to advertising the budget, having the public hearing, and then having the adoption. So the adoption will be at the October 13th meeting. Is that the date?
I think so.
I think so.
I'll check.
I think yeah, I think it is. It's on here.
14, October 14th.
14th. Okay, all right. So, now's the time to ask questions.
I guess the one question I have is, have you guys been approached from any of the directors on any major purchases? Like, I know I've had conversations with the police chief that they're gonna need new cars, and I know that they have a few of them. Did we take that into account? Can we do that out of public safety?
All we had was Eric's for $200,000 for the backhoe, but
Backhoe.
Garrett has never come to me and talked to me about any major purchases.
I know he has somewhat built that into some of the line items in general.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it was allegedly he had that built into his
Well,
budget to where he could,
Yeah, because when we started the whole new car program and
Yeah.
everything, that was,
yeah.
I just
So
wanted to
he
make
didn't have to
sure.
come and ask for extra money. It was
Right.
already there.
I just wanted to make sure, because
We did cut $60,000 out of Garrett's budget, though.
Yeah.
But he was aware.
When I was talking to him out there after the last council meeting.
Yep.
We were going over that, and he had asked that be put in, and then when we saw what the shortfall was, Ross had suggested we reposition some of the salaries and the personal services over into public safety. I spoke with Garrett about that. He didn't really want to do that, and he opted to go ahead and move the 60,000, even though we have a very healthy budget in public safety.
Well, and they have come in under budget every year between the police chief, fire chief, and
They
everything
have the
else.
highest budget too.
Well, but they've come under budget. They've obviously, our police department's got the best of the best equipment, everything else. We've been supportive. I know we got some turd vehicles that we're spending more money on
Right.
maintenance.
We just saw
and
that
fixing.
just a few minutes
Yeah,
ago.
that was just one of them. They're way worse. There's more worse than that. And that's the only reason I asked about that, because those are big hits when we do
Yeah,
that. So I just want
it
to make
is.
sure we took into account.
And underspending or not under budgeting in the public safety compared to revenue gives us that cushion, because we're building up funds there that can be used for
Right.
those type of capital
Even though I know
expenditures.
he's not going to want to do that. He's going to want
Want
to
it out of general.
high. I know, but I
Don't-
just
Let's spend my money.
well, that's exactly it. No, my piggy bank's not. That's the way he's, but I can tell you, he's mentioned it. And there's always one or two that's sitting down at Senesal's or
Mhm.
something that
Yeah.
the old Chargers are in bad shape. I mean, and then when I take the Hummer down there, it's not little stuff. It's big expenses. I mean, the upkeep on them damn things is getting ridiculous to, it's,
Even the state police had trouble with those Durangos.
those Durangos are
That's been-
turds I've seen nationally. There are
Yeah.
just that
Yeah.
you never want to go that route again. And
Nope.
the Tahoes are a big thing, and then a lot of EVs. A lot of EVs. A lot of police departments are going with EVs. I just don't know about it
I
myself,
don't know
Yeah, I don't know
about that.
either.
Yeah, me neither.
but there's a lot of them doing it.
Ew. You're welcome. That's
I
right.
Just don't let them park in my place next to the building.
Yeah.
Fire chief might know.
Yes.
that.
I will say, just so you know, so in the budget, there's 20,000 for police car purchase, which isn't gonna get you anywhere, but 20,000 for police car purchase, 60,000 for patrol car repairs in general, so 80,000 between car-related things. And then in your lit public safety, this is an equipment line item. So public safety equipment, $80,000 for public safety. So those would be, as I eyeball, what's included as a line item budget, really those would be things that could be for car purchases is about 80 in general, 80 in lit, but obviously there's probably some other expenditures that are gonna come out for repairs and
Right,
other equipment.
right.
Right.
Yes, I think the Tahoes are about 50 something a piece, I think.
Yeah.
Come to do everything and outfit them.
Well, and like I said, if we need to, we can always do additional appropriations in the public safety, because we do have a healthy budget in there.
Where was it that the backhoe was gonna come out of?
The backhoe is coming out of the local road and street. 50,000.
there.
Okay.
Yep. And then,
CCD, $16,667.
yeah, and then
And then
what you don't see is the water and sewer,
the
which
third
is
and the third
the same
out.
amount, 66,000 out of water, 66,000 have sewer.
That was my point. You don't see what's coming out of the water and
Yeah.
sewer.
Right.
It's kind of hidden, but
And I guess to say, the reason for that is those are enterprise funds, so they're not actually required to be budgeted by the Department of Local Government Finance. So there's no, gateway requirement, no approval by the DLGF. That's totally, self-controlled by the city.
All right. Thank you.
anything else? Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
Okay.
I brought copies of thank you,
Thank you,
Ross.
Ross.
Thank you
very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ross.
Of course.
I brought copies of the salary ordinance, and again, I apologize, I didn't get that sent out to everybody. I think Kaylee was the only one that actually got a copy of it. What you don't see here is I had a working sheet a spreadsheet that I was working from, and as I put in percentages of increase for everybody, I was watching the bottom line and trying to keep that at 4% because that's what was approved for this year by the DLGF. So I wanted to try to keep it to that. We, in the past, I know have given larger raises, but when you give a raise, it's forever. It's not like a one-time purchase. It's always going to be there. So what I did was watch that, and I hope I didn't speak for everybody here on the council, but I held my own raise to 4%, and I held the council to 4%. I went ahead and gave the clerk treasurer and the judge the 4.5. Clerk treasurer's position is more of a full-time position. Mine's a part-time position, even though I'm here a lot, and yours is too. So like I said, I apologize if you feel like I'm speaking for you,
I
but
think that's just fine.
I held those to 4%. There were a couple of equity issues that I took care of. Everybody else got 4.5 down the line. Clerical entry level, which we really don't have anybody in that position right now, I held that to 4%. As you look down the line, the clerk's office, obviously 4.5%, clerical part-time 4.5%, the custodian 4.5%. The equity issue that I was talking about was the park mower. As you can see, they were at $13.91 an hour compared to the park program assistant, which was making $16.05 an hour. So we were hiring high school kids to go up and work in the park and paying them $3 an hour more than we were paying somebody to mow, roughly $3 an hour. So I put them down for 8%, which bumps them up to $15.02, which is still less than the park program assistant is. But, hopefully we can make strides to make that better. You can't do it all at once. But while I was doing that, I was watching that 4% bottom line all along and trying to hold that at 4% and not go over that. Also, and I don't know where it's at here, maybe Jillian knows,
I
but
didn't get a copy of that.
And the only thing I caught was, we talked about that position for
yeah, that's what I was going
the
to
building
Oh,
commissioner.
building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not on here.
No.
So it didn't get, this is probably not the updated one then that you have, because we put that position on there at $30 an hour.
I believe so. I
And-
budgeted it.
Yeah,
Did
it's
it
in the
get?
budget. I don't see it on here. But
Okay.
I may have an old copy. I pulled this off my computer, Joanne.
Okay. I
didn't
just
pull
don't
this.
remember. I know we budgeted it in here. I didn't know if it
Yeah.
got budgeted into the salary ordinance
So
or
if it's not, we need to make sure
we
that
need to
it
get
is.
that in,
But the
yes.
reason I suggested $30 an hour on that, just to explain myself, that's a part-time position, so there's no benefits at all. There's no vacation, no sick leave, no nothing. And I felt like that we needed to try and find somebody who could fill that position well. I used a slang term for that, but I won't here. But we need to find somebody that's computer literate and also knows the business of construction and maintenance and so on.
It's definitely a skill position.
It
Yes,
is. Thank you.
absolutely.
That's a good way to put that, Dwayne. So I don't know whether we can find somebody that fills all those bills. I think I sent out a copy of the proposed job description for everybody to review here a couple of weeks ago. And I got a little bit of feedback. Everybody seemed to think that was a pretty good job description for that. But that's kind of where that one's at. I never looked before I brought these out today to see if it was on here. But
Sorry, I just want to make sure. So the person that we would hire, would they take more off of Eric's plate then?
yeah,
So Eric is currently getting paid for building commissioner and public works.
he is, and he's going to maintain being the building commissioner. But this person would act like his arms and legs to go out and do, because we're going to be doing housing rental inspections
Right.
coming up. Those pay $100 per inspection.
Right.
So that was another reason I came up with that. If it took them 3 hours to do one, that's $90. So that would cover their time for doing those inspections. Now there's probably times that this person's going to go out and not receive anything back because they're going to be out issuing building permits and doing things like that. But they would all work, this person would work under the purview of Eric.
Okay.
And he would be ultimately responsible for signing off on building permits and so on. It would just take he's covered up. I mean,
Yeah,
it's unbelievable how covered up he is right now. And I want to try to take a little bit of that off his plate if I can.
And just to add on to that, the ordinance that was established under the rental inspection requires that a new fund be established for those rental inspections. There's actually 2 new funds. At this point, there's 0 revenues in those funds, so those funds are not able to support even a portion of this position. And I didn't even think about that until it was just now brought up. But that salary is also built into the general fund. In subsequent years, once there are revenues coming into those funds, then we'll be able to reduce what's being paid out of the general and pay I mean, they'll always, if they're doing building permits and things like that, or working in that capacity, that's not gonna fall under the purview of the rental inspections. So there'll always be a portion, but I anticipate in the future budgets that it's not gonna be the full portion coming out of our general budget, which is how it's reflected for 2025.
Right. Once it gets to be self-perpetuating kind of thing,
Hopefully 2/3 of it may come out of the revenues from it, and maybe a third. I guess it's just gonna depend on,
once it kind of gets more stable though.
right.
Yeah.
So that
And
will be,
I'm just hoping we can find somebody for that amount of money. If not, the backup plan in my mind's maybe contract it out and find somebody to do it on
You
contract
probably want
basis.
somebody with an electrician background too.
Well, but it's gotta have a mix between electricity
Yeah,
and
right.
plumbing and, kind of everything to where
Yeah.
you want,
And Eric should be able to train them because he knows all those things. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he should be able to help him at that point.
I asked him if he had a clone that we could.
Yeah.
So at this point, we could make changes to this still, is that correct?
Mhm.
I'm gonna bring up something, maybe an unpopular, but I wanna see what people's thoughts are. We've really taken care of our police department this year. Their longevity pay was considerable. Eric's team is not compensated correctly. We've talked about skills and we've talked about one thing after another.
it cannot be increased. The budget cannot be increased.
Right. But
Okay,
if we pull some, let's say we give our officers above, our new ILEA training or not trained, and we reduce the police department down the positions to 3% or something, that would give us a little bit more to throw, a little bit more towards some of Eric's positions. I just thought I'd open and see if anybody was open to that, because
I'm glad you brought it
if you
up,
look at
Because
what
that
we
was
did,
my issue.
that they got 2 really good raises, and Eric's team.
Somebody on this would be getting a $13,000 raise for the year. $13,000.
Police officer, you mean?
Yes. Somebody else is $12,000.
well, let me
$10,000.
see what you're looking at, because
$9,000.
those are reflective of all the positions. We don't actually have people in all those positions.
Okay, and that's, yes.
So that
I
may
just-
be, you may not be looking at it correctly.
All I did was I just did the numbers out to the side from.
We have no first-class police officers.
Okay.
We have 0.
Okay.
We do have a sergeant now.
We have a chief of police, we have assistant chief, we have a sergeant, we have no first-class police officers at
Okay.
all. we have, as of right now.
I'm so glad you said that too, because I honestly, I have no idea. I don't know where everybody.
You don't
Yeah, I
understand
would
it.
not know, yeah.
Right.
And we got 2 in training right now.
That, yes, we've got 2 that are in, at ILEA in training. And then the reason you do see patrolman 1, 2, and 3
Mhm.
is we do actually have people in each one of this isn't the updated one because there's supposed to be a patrolman 4 on there.
I saw it's not.
This is, this is, we will send you out a corrected one, because this is not up to date. And in the corrected one, we actually added more details so you would know how many officers fall in each of those
Okay,
categories.
that's good. Okay.
Because like I said, with the salary ordinance, you have to reflect every possible position, but that doesn't mean you have every position filled.
That makes sense, okay.
Well, and I just, when I look at the numbers, just longevity overall, that is a considerable raise. And I know I support that. I don't want to do anything to harm everything great we've been doing, but I'm just concerned about Eric's team and being able to fill this open spot he's had open since last year.
Mhm.
And
Something we need.
I don't disagree, you know, and I told Scott before this meeting, when him and I was talking about this, when we passed this longevity pay, we really never thought about the future, you know, and is this sustainable? The chief sat here and he said, I've got the money in my budget to cover it, but that's this year. What about next year and the year after and the year after?
Right.
And we see that we have a shortfall in general. We do have capital projects, but until we know what that's going to level out at, you know, and we don't know what's sustainable. We don't know what our new normal is.
Well, if we
And
get
did
in-
that also increase what the city has to pay in perf for the
Mhm.
police department too? Because that would have been that much more we should have probably discussed back when. we were
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about it.
but they've got a surplus in their funds and everything else.
For
So
this year,
if we get into 2026 or something and there's still a surplus and they're doing what they're doing,
What do
we
you
can
mean a
always-
surplus in their funds? Clarify.
the only reason he had a surplus is because he had positions that were open that hadn't.
Right, that
been
hadn't been
Right.
filled.
right, so I guess when I.
It's not really a surplus.
And you
it's-
can't really look at the police department individually because the police department is funded out of our general fund. So unless you have a surplus in the general fund, the police department doesn't have a surplus.
Okay,
They may just not be spending everything they
well, and I say
budgeted.
surplus, but I mean public safety. We can tag part of public safety and capture that moving forward, so we're not, like for 2026,
You mean transfer some of the expenses out of general to public safety?
no, say we need to pull some out of public safety to cover this additional longevity raise.
For the police? That's what I just said.
Okay, yeah.
Move some of the salaries to public safety
Got it.
out of general. Yeah. I just said it the opposite.
And I know maybe it's not a popular welcomed and, you know, I'm on the police merit board and everything else, I want to do everything there, but I'm worried about Eric's team. And these
Yeah,
guys work hard
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and they take care of us. And I know the police department does too, but we've really,
We got to make sure that we're not forgetting them.
Mhm.
Well, and I don't think that the percentage way of doing this is a bad idea, but we're giving raises to somebody, that's somebody's salary, and then you got somebody that's hourly.
well, they're hourly. The police officers aren't hourly.
But this
That
is,
equates to that. That's just, they're showing you annual numbers, but it's based on hourly rate that they're.
No, the police are salaried.
Oh, they're salary?
They're salaried.
Oh,
Our
sorry.
other
No,
employees are hourly.
Well, then they get plus,
They do
plus
get
they get
overtime,
overtime though, and their
right,
overtime is
right.
time and a half.
Right.
I'm agreeing, Scott, we're agreeing for one, for once now, but I'm also, but for once, we're agreeing for once on this. But
Write
my,
that down, Scott.
Yeah.
my.
It's held forever. We're
Yeah.
live streaming.
So I'm not, again, I agree with Scott. I'm not saying that I don't want them to have a pay increase, but just in those top 3 that I know that we said, chief of police, assistant chief, and sergeant, that's 21,000 extra dollars like that. And then on top of that, there's a good, just in those 3, we've got almost $9,000, $13,000, and $10,000 wrapped up in their increase then for this year.
So why did you vote for $10,000?
Yeah, why did you vote for
No,
that
no.
when it was presented?
I'm not saying
When it was
because
presented.
honestly, my thought was I didn't think that. To be honest with you, I thought for we would not be going 4.5% across the board. This needs to be.
Well, I'm
Oh, I see what you're saying. You
I-
didn't think they were gonna get a,
I didn't think we were doing
4.5%.
both. I
Okay,
thought
I gotcha.
that we were going to
Okay.
do this, and then we would talk about whatever this looked like. So I'm not,
Okay,
you-
I
that's
understand
what
what you're
yeah,
saying.
that's what I mean.
And I'm fully supportive of the longevity. We've got to do retention. We've done a great job.
Mhm.
We did lose an officer, you know about,
A week ago.
yep, a week ago. We did lose an officer. That'll come out, or I don't know if everybody knows or not. But I just would say, I don't want to not give them a raise, but if we give them a little bit less and we can give a little bit more to Eric's team, I think that'd be great.
I think we should be looking at not just Eric's team. I think nobody else got, I mean, all these other of our friends here
Well,
got.
they're built, when I
the,
say Eric's team, that's all your wastewater, that's your common labor.
That's your,
all-
your hourly people.
that's-
That's
all
what
your
I mean,
hourly
hourly people.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
probably a better way
And
to do it.
even
All
if
your
we, you know-
civil employees.
Yes,
I'm not
the-
saying
yes.
not, I mean, you wouldn't even
Well,
include
there's
in the
still two
clerk.
more would be in her office.
The clerk,
Yeah.
well, that's
Well,
why I
the
said
civil
the
clerk,
clerk, the
Yeah,
deputy
that's what I
clerk.
mean, yeah.
Because if we look at the numbers and we cut that down, just for example, if we cut the police department down, let's give them 3%. If you got 1.5% off what they have there, what would that do for you number wise if we went to 3% on them?
What if?
Because
just
you've got a total budget of 4%, but if you cut them to 3 and you use that extra that you got
I'd be,
built in,
I've still got my sheet in there, my worksheet that has all those formulas plugged in. I'd be happy to take those back to 3.5% or 3% or whatever you guys say. And we'll see how much of a surplus, not surplus, but see how much money we have that we can move elsewhere.
because the budget is the budget, but we want to try to take care of everybody and we take care of them,
Absolutely.
you know, so the number is the number. We can't go higher or anything else, but that's something I'd be fully
What
supportive
about
of.
instead of taking it?
And I would say
Please.
everything besides park programs and, you know, we, like you said, if a park mower is out there making less than somebody
So
that's.
I can give any
You
raise
know.
to the park program people at all.
And I think we took care of them.
And
several times now.
they're healthy.
And what happened with the park program was 2020. They needed specialized
Right.
people doing it, and that's when they got the bigger bump
They
in
got the
their
bigger
increases
bumps and everything else. And
And a lot of people were compassionate because they wanted the kids to be able to go to the park program.
Right.
They wanted skilled people to take care of them, even though they were high school kids, but
Yeah.
that's how it was presented back then.
Is there any, I'm looking at, because I brought this up before, and I did vote yes on it. I just want to, afterwards, I had got to thinking about it, and I didn't love that somebody is making $18.50, and that's a cushy job. I've done it. It's cushy.
You can't reduce.
can't reduce it.
No,
I
that's what I'm
can't-
saying. Once you do it, it's done.
Yeah,
It's
you can't
forever.
reduce it. It's forever.
So,
Well, then I think that we're about 26 cents off. Can we not make the summer help second years 15?
Well, to me, I mean,
I mean, I know you were talking, I know that because they're already at 6%.
I think by just looking at the numbers, if you take it
You can give me one.
1.5%,
I thought it printed
and I
out.
just threw that out there. If you took 1.5% off what we were talking about doing for police department, I think that's going to give you a pretty good chunk to be able to distribute across those others. But
Would it be,
Who'd you say, who were you talking about, Kaylee? I'm sorry.
Well, it says summer help second year. I guess I was looking at the very bottom of this. I guess I was looking at that was like Eric's season. Is that not Eric's seasonal help? I was looking at like some of the kids that go around and just weedy. I don't know if that's them.
Yeah, that's Eric's summer help.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, yeah.
Weed
So-
eaters,
yeah.
people like that. So, yeah, and they were kind of at a deficit.
Yeah.
And this made it a little bit, if you look at the salaries, or not the salaries, but the hourly rate over here, it kind of steps up as you go through, as it should.
would it be a terrible thing if we just lowered everybody's just a little bit? Instead of just taking down the police, just kind of spread it across the board a little
Where
bit?
are you gonna take it from? I mean, we're talking about raising the civil employees up, so I can't take anything off of the civil employees and still raise them up. The only place you can take it would be us
And the police?
and the police.
Okay.
I mean, just as an example, I mean, I'd rather you do it on the spreadsheet, but I think you're going to find that you could probably find a number there.
There's gonna
You
be,
could go 3.5 even with them, and that will do,
Well-
I think what I'm,
I'm gonna be in the office tomorrow. Why don't I sit down on that spreadsheet in the morning and I will play with those numbers and see what it gives me to move around.
Can I also say one more thing about that?
Yeah.
I know you brought it up earlier too. I'm just kind of going off of what you said. We talked before about performance. We've talked about this every year, and I bring this up, and I'm going to keep bringing it up till we hopefully do something. And that's no one to blame here. This is just something to talk about. We're giving these raises across the board, and it's like just like what you said. Well, you already gave it, so that's what it is. Like I can't take that
and
away.
I'd almost like next year, and I respect Eric and all of them enough that I would like to see it broken down where you give each one of your directors a budget. And if they determine somebody gets 5 and somebody else gets 2,
I don't disagree with that.
then let them do it. Let them make the hard call. But there are some average Joes that are just sliding by, and there's some that do above and beyond. And
Yep.
you know,
That's true.
And that's
that's what
I
our
agree.
company
I'm
works.
sure you ran into that, and
You-
I back in the day when Purdue would give a 4% raise, my department got 4%, but then I could say, Scott, you get 2, you get 5, and you get 3. You could take and move that money around
That's
to
the
the
way-
people that, and another thing, when you're trying to do equity, say you've got somebody who's been there for 30 years and they're at the top of the pay scale and they're making, let's say, $25 an hour. And I've got somebody over here that's doing the same job that's making $10 an hour. So I give you both 4% or 5% or whatever. The gap just gets wider and wider.
Right.
It gets
all
worse
the
and
time.
worse
The
every
higher
time.
you're paid, the bigger increase you
Yeah.
get. It's
And
like
that's
this.
why I don't necessarily love
So-
the percentage because it's the same thing across.
it just gives managers.
So
the
what
authority.
I used to do is say, okay, you get 75%, you get 75 or not percent, 75 cents, and you get 75 cents. So you both got the same raise, and the gap didn't get any wider that way.
We did that one year with the old council. We just did, and the people that got paid more weren't too happy about it, but the people that were lower, they
were
were
tickled
more
to death.
appreciative.
I don't remember.
Well, we don't.
I don't know if you were on the council then. That might have been early
That
going.
might have been when I wasn't on.
It- I mean, I'm not saying we don't want to retain all of our employees, but there are some that obviously do better than others. And each one of your department heads, as much as you're out and about, we talk to, all of them, Eric and them supervise them, they see them every day. They know. And I respect them all enough that they will make the hard decision. Hey, you're only getting 2%
Well,
this
they
year.
know where to
And
put
So
it, but-
that way we're not cookie slicing it where they just automatically, last
Right.
few years, we're doing 4%.
So you're basically
3%.
saying you have X amount of money, you decide how you're going to distribute it to your
That-
employees.
The mayor says, this is your number right here. You determine that.
Well, I could send them a spreadsheet with all their people on it, and here's the 4% down at the bottom, and you make this equal 4%, and I don't care how you divide it up.
This is your 4%. This is your
Yeah.
number that you get
Yeah.
to distribute.
But they
Now
have
you-
to also
now you do
be
it.
able to at somewhat back that up. Because if someone wants to
Yeah,
come and say,
you got to
hey,
make sure it's
Yeah.
not like
yep,
they're being harassed because
No,
they
well,
don't like it.
It's
or
not
something.
harassment, and there's nothing you can go back. It's all performance related.
And,
I'm
and
sure
we
they-
talked about that too, if you remember right, Dwayne. This is coming back to me a
Yeah.
little bit now because we talked about annual or biannual performance appraisals.
Right.
And
I think we've been talking about it since when I was first started on
you
the
shouldn't
council.
surprise, and I've always said you should not surprise somebody at the end of the year saying, "Hey, I wasn't satisfied with your performance. You're not getting a good raise." Well, what have I been doing wrong? Nobody told me I was doing anything
And this
wrong.
should be a set down conversation when they get their raise each year, just like we do. You have once a year performance review, and it could be as simple as what you're doing good, what you're doing bad, what do you need from me, what can we do to help you, all
But,
this
but
stuff.
that performance
And that-
review needs to happen before raise time. So that
Absolutely.
you got a chance to redeem yourself.
Right.
Probably like midway through the year. In the
Yeah.
summer.
And
No.
I want to throw one more thing out there. We've got 2 brand new officers, and this years of service will not go. They will not see any years of service benefit until they've completed 1 full year.
At
Right.
least, well, yeah.
Right.
And they're ILEA trained, which they're all in school now, I think, right?
Right. Yes, they are. So, for example, the ones that started in February and April of last year, they're not gonna get that $1,000 in January. They won't get it till the following year.
Right.
So, you're
That's why I was
talking,
saying we don't adjust theirs, or if you roll out
Right,
a number to the
right.
police chief and say, hey, here,
right,
boom, then I
Right,
would like to
because-
think that he would take care of some of them that are new to
That
help
aren't-
with his retention and,
because that's what I was thinking, you really need to take into consideration, if you're looking at retention, which was the years of service, these new people coming in that aren't gonna benefit from that. Do you really want to reduce them from 4.5, to 3 or to whatever? So it's not it's just more complicated.
and this is not taken away from our police department.
No.
No one is
No.
guaranteed a raise every year. No one's guaranteed a merit.
But
So
funny
you-
we say that, we have given raises every year.
Well, if we.
So I'm just saying that too. There's some that we have given raises every single year, and I'm just doing the math on this a little bit. The amount of money I'm gonna be that person, and I apologize to the police. I think we do a great job. We gave them a lot of money for years of service.
But not all of them.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
So you
Okay,
can't
didn't
just
all-
across
they're
the
not all
board.
benefiting
What
from
I'm
it,
seeing
Kaylee.
right now is I see a chief of police, I see assistant sergeant, I see assistant chief, I see a sergeant. How many people, we have nobody at first class police. How many patrolman one do we have?
That's what's on the other spreadsheet.
Oh,
That's
sorry,
what I'll
okay.
have,
Yeah.
that's what we'll
Well,
get to
I'm just
here.
saying, I'm looking at the first line item there. If you I went off the, whatever you called it, as their actual for 2024, this is not gonna be popular. I went down to 2%, and that gave them a $1,500 pay increase. And that person has 5 years of service. That's $6,500. That is a fantastic pay increase. Fantastic. Like unheard
I
of.
understand what you're saying, but I'm gonna play the devil's advocate a little bit. We voted to give them, we didn't, you did, to give them
What's this
longevity.
weird-
Right, yes.
Okay, so now.
That's one time it's better to be in that
It
job.
is. So,
We
like I said, I'm
didn't.
playing devil's advocate here. So now you're gonna take away part of that
Well, I
because
think
of
that
you're not gonna give them the raise.
I'm not taking
You-
away
you're
from
either
it. I don't think a 6,000,
No,
I-
I see what you're
But
saying.
listen, it is, but it's a raise, but then it's a retention thing. If we don't continue to invest and retain them, we'll lose them, and
you
then we're.
guys, we have to stop spending money like it's freaking
Yeah.
water.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And
But-
this right here,
Me too.
if you did that, I'm saying this, this could be, you could take this from us. I'm not trying to pick on a department here.
No,
I'm just using this as an
Overall,
example,
yeah.
as an overall. This is a lot of money.
I thought
It is.
4.5
It's
was
a
pretty
lot,
high.
and I'm saying, you're right, we did vote for longevity. We did, and I'm
we
not
put a
going
number
against
to
that.
that.
We did. So I am not.
So now we're gonna go back and we're gonna renege on that and take it away over on this side.
No.
You see, you gave it to them here, but now you're gonna take it away.
But
over
my
here.
thing is
No,
that's
no,
guaranteed. A raise every year isn't guaranteed, but here's the thing. We're not willing to not give people, I'm not saying we shouldn't give raises. That's also not what I'm saying. But we're
So I'm just
also,
playing devil's advocate because I know what they're gonna say.
Well, I know, but we're not taking something, they're not entitled to that. We took care of them. They got 2 raises this last year.
nobody else got this type of raise.
I understand,
throughout.
but what I'm saying is we voted to give them a retention raise of this amount.
Right.
And now that raise time comes out, well, now since you got that, we're not gonna give you this much over here. So you're eroding that raise that you gave them for retention away. That's
No,
all I'm
and
saying.
I don't want to look at it like that. I'm saying that they get less than.
I know that's what they're
There's,
saying.
oh, well, that's okay. They can say it. They've been taken care of and I support them and they know it, but they should get less. We need to help Eric and his team out.
And I
get a
agree with
cross-balance.
that too.
And I will gladly talk to any one of them about it. It's not, we've taken care of them and it's not taking away from them. We're not all entitled. I didn't get a damn 4.5%
I
raise
didn't
this
either.
year.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
I know
So,
inflation.
but I think that's a
inflation's way
good,
higher.
but that's a good point. That's my whole point. It is not 100% that you automatically get a raise. Ours should be performance based. If you go back and look at any of our last city council meetings when we discussed this, I have said this for years. It is not fair. It is not fair that somebody that is making this amount of money is getting a 4.5% pay increase while somebody else that is making 1914 is getting a 4.5%. That goes up $20. It went to
You know what, I want to chime in, and I'm not taking sides on this. I have no vote. But you also have to take into consideration the skill level. I mean, you guys are wanting to compensate people for their skill. That's been a discussion for the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
All right. How many of the city guys literally go away to an academy for 3 months, full time, to get trained to be able to do their job? I mean, we're talking about skills here.
You're
want to
absolutely
compensate.
right.
You want to compensate people for skills. Well, our police are the most skilled employees that we have.
You are absolutely right. Not at a $13,000 a year pay increase, because that's what we're at.
But I'm
That
just
that
saying.
person's getting
You know, you can have
$13,000.
somebody working for Eric that has zero skills.
You're right, and Eric hones them in. Eric gets what their
Right,
skills down
but
100%.
but I just want to throw that out there. I mean, you obviously were recognizing, like I said, I don't care. I'm not getting kickbacks from the police department. And it makes no difference to me, but you do have to, you want to compensate people based on their skill level.
Well, and
Not
I,
anybody
I
can
would
step into that
interject, though, that
position.
we are investing in those officers. We pay for their academy. And if they don't stay here, then that's why we've done so much to retain officers.
and their compensation is considerably higher than anybody that's on any of the other positions. So I think that we're taking care of them. I think we've done great. I think they're competitive against anybody around here.
Again, I don't want to take it away from the people that aren't getting that extra money for the longevity. But if I go back and reduce those to 3.5%, let's see what that looks like, and I'll send that out to everybody.
I would like
Get
to.
back with you.
I
Is
I
that
want to
okay?
see it lower than that. I would like to see, because that's a, you guys, it's a lot of money.
Well, why don't I run it a couple ways?
Yeah, can you do
I'll
it starting
run
at 2?
I'll
2 to
I'll
5?
say, here's where we're at. I can put together a spreadsheet pretty quick for that, and
I'm sorry, I know that's making you do a lot of extra work though.
oh, I don't mind, Kaylee.
I know, well, I don't, but I don't like
I'm
to.
getting paid $1.44 an hour.
Some days, not even that.
I think that was right anyway. 4 and 4.5, that's a pretty high percent increase.
Yeah, and we could take a
really
move.
is.
No, that's what I was saying. I mean, when I look at it,
I'd say like 3.5 and 4 across the board, nothing else, just lower it all. I don't get a
Across the
4%
board
increase.
to where?
Hear that, Dad? I don't get a 4% increase.
Yeah.
Across the board, when you say across the board, what are you talking about?
Well, I mean, I see a 4% and 4.5, it's awfully generous.
Well, we were offered, that's not a good word. We can raise it 4%, that's our cap.
Mhm.
So I was trying to bring people up that are, especially our civil employees who are not police, anybody that's not police is considered a
Right.
civil employee. So I was trying to bump them up as much as I could and take care of the equity issues with the park mowers. That's why they got 8% instead of 4% or 4.5%.
so overall, what we talked about, he took nothing for a few positions, but that number overall made it to where he could do 4.5% across there. So now, if we look at it another way, where we don't do it for specifically for the police department, and maybe if there's others out there that you disagree with, if we adjust it down to 4, then I guess a little bit more to do. We got to do some catch up on some of Eric's guys, Eric's team. We have
Definitely
to.
agree
I'm
with
telling
you
you
on
right
that.
now. And when he can't fill a position for over a year because we're not even competitive on compensation,
Mhm.
there's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, this should be an awesome job for anybody that want to work for the city, and it should be competitive to where we should be a first choice rather than a last choice and turn down an offer.
Also, sorry, I was just looking back on the park program director. It doesn't have it listed as there's a percentage there, but it goes from 2140 up to 2183. We're not changing
That's-
anything with them,
That's
right?
because we raised that
Oh, we did.
here at the middle of the year, right?
Oh, I thought that was the assistant. That was just the assistant.
That was
one
the
we changed.
assistant.
Yeah, but that's an old spreadsheet, so
Yeah,
that's
it's an old, it's
That's
not
not even-
the, there were
Okay, so it's
some
not even accurate.
corrections that needed made.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because that, but
No,
we
I
don't
didn't give
have
the park
intention.
program
Okay.
people any percentage raise at
Okay.
all.
So we've already taken care of those off cycle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if there's no percentage out there, they're not getting it.
Okay, okay. The number was just different. so
Yeah,
that's-
I don't know why that was, but I'll look at that, Kaylee.
So are you been here patiently waiting or anything? Any input, questions or anything?
I'm just moved here Thursday and just wanted to sit in and.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Come back to the
Yeah.
next meeting. This one is kind of boring. I mean, this is, you know,
This
Until the
is a special
pickleball
meeting.
ground
this is a special meeting, but feel free to come to the next one. Yeah.
October the 14th is our first regular council.
Okay, very well.
And we've been live streaming for over a year now on our YouTube channel, and you can access that from the city's website. You can go back and watch at your heart's content as many council and board of
Well,
works
welcome.
meetings as
Depending
you
on how
want.
bored you really are.
But please do, or come to, you can still come to the meetings. We love when people are here to listen.
I live right across the street, so.
Okay,
Perfect.
awesome.
Well, congratulations.
Yes.
Is that Cockrell Village, is that where you're
Or this one over here.
over here?
The manse, I'm a pastor at the.
Oh,
Oh,
Yes,
okay. So
thank
this is
you.
man over there.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually heard a lot about you. I'll have to tell you after. All good things, all good things.
Good, good.
Well, I think that brought up a lot. That was my only concern. And I feel like we all
Well,
were very,
like I said, we don't have to pass this tonight, so.
I appreciate
Why-
everybody
Why
listening.
don't I put
'cause
that
That
together
went
and
better
I'll,
than what
and I'll
I
put
thought.
some percentages on there. If it's this, it's this. If it's this, it's this. And you guys can look at it and see what you think.
And as I said, I will abstain from any votes or anything since my wife works for the city, but I do like having input because it concerns all
Oh,
employees.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely, I get that.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Oh, wait, hold on. We still talk about insurance, right?
We
Well-
actually, we can, and I brought
Sorry.
a spreadsheet and everybody has this, but what I did was take the current, what we have and put it on the spreadsheet. And, I estimated at 15% per year clear out to 2028. And I even put a place on there for if we're paid weekly, this is what it's gonna cost you. If we're paid bi-weekly, this is what it's gonna cost you out of your check. I put 3 different of the AIM plans on there, so you could kind of compare apples to apples. But you can see as you get closer to that 2028 mark, every one of the AIM plans is cheaper at that point in time than the current plan at the current rate of growth. I did talk to our insurance agent from Anthem the other day, and he said, sorry, I can't really tell you anything until October the 15th, which Dwayne knows. And that's when it comes out. He said, what I can tell you is, though, that he said AIM probably, and I was upfront with him, told him what we were doing. And he says, AIM probably used the same criteria to rate you for this year as we will. So he said, I don't expect ours to come back any cheaper than what AIM is because they have greater bargaining power. He did say that Terre Haute was going with AIM this year, they will be the biggest person in that, or biggest group in that municipality in that group. And he said, he really doesn't blame anybody for trying to find a better deal. But he said, with no more people than we have, it's very difficult. And he said, you really can't go out and shop it. He said, everybody's going to give you the same rate. It's just a matter of how much your brokerage fees are for that. And AIM, of course, they go out and they shop it I don't know how often they shop it, whether it's annually but they're United Healthcare right now rather than Anthem. And those are your 2 big players in healthcare insurance anyways, is those 2.
And they don't get brokerage fees because
Right, they don't charge a brokerage fee.
they don't charge a brokerage
Because
fee.
we're a member of AIM, which used to be the Indian.
IACT.
Yeah, IACT, thank you. But it'll be interesting to see what they come back and want to charge us for what we have this year. And another thing, I stressed when I put out this email the other day is, please look at the
The
maximum
coverage,
amount of
yeah.
pocket, what it's going to cost you, and your deductibles. Look at the big picture, because I think a lot of people are just focused in on what's it going to cost me every week
Yeah.
out of my paycheck. And AIM does have this Plan 9 on here. If you look at it, it's actually cheaper today than what the projected cost of what we currently have.
Have you gotten a lot of feedback? I know we had.
I've heard from 3 employees,
Okay.
and they were all we're afraid to change. We don't want to change right now.
Okay.
But I talked to Eric and I tried to pull him for what his employees thought. And he said nobody's complaining about it. He said he thought it was all good. He said you're going to hear from the people that
Don't
are
want to.
against it,
That
don't
like
want to change. But he said his employees are good. He said he'd kind of like to see two plans available, a high deductible and low deductible, and that way you could, if you wanted to put more in it, you could.
Didn't Purdue give us that option one?
Oh, yeah,
They had us three different
Yeah,
options.
they have three different
Yeah.
options. But, another thing, I told somebody the other day I was talking to about it. If we had a way of looking in our crystal ball and somebody wanted to take the high deductible plan that was cheaper, not only for us, but for them, maybe we could come up with a plan to take the difference and put it in an HSA for
Like subsidize it.
and put in, Purdue does that. They put in a little money in the HSA for you every year.
That's what when I was at the school, that's what they did too. My
And,
deductible was
and I don't-
6,000 and they put in half.
I don't think anybody really understands, they think HSA, oh, big deal, won't mess with that. It's 30 cents on the dollar
Mm-hmm.
that you save. There's actually a breaking point, and it's different for each individual, but there's a breaking point there where you could put X amount of dollars into this HSA and not reduce your take-home pay at all because of the tax break that you get. So that's like free money. The more you use it, the better off you are. But I just don't think there's a good understanding across the board of what that can do for you.
And just from a self-employed person's perspective, having an HSA is going to reduce your taxable income, your federal taxable income. The money you can contribute up to $8,000 this year, it'll go up next year into an HSA. That money goes in before taxes, so you're reducing how much you're paying taxes on. The money can be invested now. I mean, it can just go into a checking account or savings account, an interest-bearing savings account. So the money is going in before taxes. Whatever growth you have on that money is not taxed ever. If you spend it on medical expenses, the growth or the contributions, neither are taxed. And the money follows you. It's your account. So it follows you. You never lose it. It rolls over. It stays there just like your checking account. And then when you're 65, you can pull that money out for any reason and use it for any reason. And none of it's taxed. None of the contributions and none of the growth. That is one of the biggest trends in retirement planning to create tax-free income in retirement are these HSA plans. Because you're getting a huge benefit up front by reducing the taxes you pay, increasing your refunds, reducing the taxes you pay, and then being able to contribute up to whatever the maximum is. If you're over 50, you can contribute an extra $1,000, but then that money stays with you. If you're healthy, you're cutting the amount of taxes you pay. You're getting this money that you can use if you need it. If you don't, it's a retirement plan. I mean, it is huge.
And
it is huge.
This is kind of a gamble. Anytime you're messing with markets and risk and all, it's a gamble. But let's say we decide just to go with what we've got for this year and let it ride another year, and you could probably do that. But if you decide to opt in next year, you're going to have the same thing with AIM that you do this year. You're going to be on your own essentially. They're going to rate you based on your current risk and your current pool of people. So let's say we had somebody or a couple of people or three people that had some catastrophic illness in the next year, that rating could go up. If we had people drop out, it could go down a little bit. So you're on your own with AIM for that first year, but then after the first year, you go into the pool, so to speak, of people. And, the guy from AIM told me, he said they've got a lot of municipalities that were rated high when they came in, but then that next year they had a drop dead nothing rating and they didn't really raise them up any because they were already paying higher than everybody else was. So it's a gamble no matter what you do. But I think eventually what we have is, as I've said this before, it's not sustainable. I don't think, and you can look at the graph, or not the graph, but the spreadsheet, and see that there comes a point in time where what we've got is gonna pass what we're, and it's gonna, they're gonna cross paths. And depending on which plan you're on, depends on how quickly that happens. But I know people don't like change. I get it, like this deal going to a 2-week pay period. I know people don't like that.
I'm still hearing about it.
I asked Judd the other day, I said, Judd, is any of your other municipalities on a 2-week pay period? He said, all of them. He said, nobody pays by the week anymore. He said, that's so antique. He said, I can't believe you're still doing it. And just because Harrison Steel does it doesn't mean that we should do it. I said, maybe they've got more office help than we do. I don't know. But, and regardless, I don't care if you had 5 people in the clerk's office. That's still 26 days or 13 days, however long it takes to do it. So you can do it in half a day. That's still 13 days. That's almost 3 weeks of pay for somebody that you could have them doing other things. So, from a business standpoint, I just think it makes good sense. All right. Kaylee, can we go home?
Yes, I'm ready. I'll make a motion.
All right. Got a motion, have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
I'll
everyone.
get that out to you as soon as I get put back
Thank
together.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting, everyone. Have a great night.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you, everybody.